Hello, welcome to part 6 of the Act. We're still going on with the 8-week study challenge. In part 6, we're going to look at the general procurement and asset disposal principles. And this runs from section 53 to section 68. So the first item you're going to look at is procurement and asset disposal planning. Every procuring entity is required to prepare a procurement plan prior to commencement of the next financial year. And the PPRA has provided formats which you should use when you are preparing your procurement and asset disposal plans for the following financial year. In a nutshell, your procurement plans should be within the approved budget. The other thing is that you must also factor in 30% of the procurement budget for AGPO. So as part of your procurement plan, you must have a section where you have enumerated the 30% allocation to the AGPO groups, that is youth, women, and persons with disability. Then you're also supposed to prepare an asset disposal plan for the year, those items which you intend to dispose. As part of the format, the procurement plan, of course, you're supposed to indicate the quantities that you're going to buy, the estimated unit price. Then you will have the method of procurement, which is going to be used, followed by the key dates when you're going to carry out key procurement activities. So in a nutshell, that's all there is about procurement planning. Please note that you're not supposed to initiate a procurement if you don't have enough funds. Then number 2, if something is not in the procurement plan, then that is illegal. What you're supposed to do is when you're reviewing your budgets, this is usually half year around December, beginning of January. If you review your budgets and now you have new items which you intended to include in your procurement plan, then you propose that those new items are also captured in the procurement plan, then captured in the budget. Then subsequently, now you as the procurement person, you're also able to revise the procurement plans and seek approvals for any revisions. I'm not sure if there's anything I have skipped. So after you have prepared your procurement plans, you're supposed to submit them to PPRA. Excuse me. You're supposed to submit them to PPRA. And now there's a new requirement that came with the revisions that you're supposed to publish. You're supposed to publish and publicize the approved procurement plan within your entity's website. Then after they've been submitted to PPRA, the authority also will publish and publicize them in the tender portal. Just note that is one of the revisions that came in with the 2022. Another thing you need to note, I think I've already mentioned it. Let me move to section 54, no splitting of contracts. You know, when you prepare your procurement plan, it is expected that you will indicate the procurement method which will be used to procure the items listed in the procurement plan or even in the disposal plan. So as you know, we have threshold. We have threshold for quotation, threshold for open tender, and all of them as provided for in the regulations. So some people may tend to avoid, for instance, open tender because it is tedious and it takes more time. So they might tend to split up procurement into 2 or into 3 so that it fits, say, RFQ. You are warned against that no procurement entity may structure procurement as 2 or 3 procurements for the purpose of avoiding the use of a procurement procedure, except where prescribed. Where is it prescribed? It is only prescribed in a scenario where you want to give an opportunity to AGPO teams, then now you lot that procurement. You prepare various lots so that they're able to get a piece of that procurement, because if you give them the full, they may not have capacity to handle it. So except where prescribed, and whereby it is prescribed, it is in a scenario for AGPO groups. You're doing a procurement targeting AGPO groups, then you split them so that they are able to participate in that tender. But in any other scenarios, it is not expected that you split the contract so as to fit into a particular procurement method. I hope that is clear. Then you, as a head of procurement, it is expected that you do market surveys. Market surveys will give you information about how the market is for whatever that you want to procure. You'd be able to know what quality is there, which suppliers are there, around how much is whatever you want to buy being bought at. That way you're able to safeguard your institution from a scenario where they cannot get value for money. So, and PPRA has a responsibility of providing market price indexes on a quarterly basis. But even in a scenario where they haven't given, you're not exonerated from carrying out a market survey. So read more about that on section 54. Then section 55 is about eligibility to bid. Who is that person? What is that entity that qualifies to participate in bidding? I think you can read more on that, but for instance, that person must have legal capacity to enter into a contract for procurement and asset disposal, is not insolvent. When we say person, it's not necessarily an individual. It also means an organization, is a member of a regulated profession, has satisfied all the professional requirements, that is if you're going for professional services. And let me move further. The person or his or her subcontractor is not debarred. Remember, we talked about debarment and conditions for debarment. So it's not debarred from participating, has fulfilled tax obligations, and has not been convicted of corrupt and fraudulent practices, is not guilty of any serious violation or violation of fair employment laws and practices. So such are the things that actually most of the time we put as mandatory requirements for any tender. So any bidder who gives you false information shall be disqualified and be considered ineligible. And in other cases, you as the procuring entity, you can even go ahead and report this person to PPRA recommending debarment. Good. We move to section 56, use of lists from other procuring entities. Excuse me. I have a cold. Use of lists of another state organ or public entities. A public entity may seek in writing to use a list of another state organ, or to use a list that has been published by a professional body, provided that list was developed competitively, and if it is from a regulated body, a professional body, provided that that list complies with all the requirements that are required for registration. So you obtain that list and you invite, along with your list, you invite for quotations or for any method of procurement that you will decide to use. Then use of registered suppliers. So a procuring entity is expected to maintain a list of its registered suppliers or contractors. The submission of application to be registered is continuous, but you as a PE, you do the update on a regular basis. So get that from section 57. Section 58 talks of standard procurement and asset disposal documents. These documents are provided by PPRA. They're meant to ensure harmonization of processes, harmonization of information. And you as a procuring entity, you as a procurement person, you are supposed to ensure that all your procurements, yes, all of them, including RFQ. I know RFQ changed. It used to be a form, just a form, very simple. When the standard documents were changed, it became a booklet. Don't fall into the temptation of going back to your form. Just do things the right way. Use the standard tender documents. Even for disposal, we have so many of them. Just go to the regulation. You will see them listed. Go to PPRA, download them, study them. Take time to understand what is different in these standard tender documents from what we previously had. It is very, very, very sad when you as a procurement officer or the person in charge of procurement, you provide a tender document which is obsolete or to the users, or you don't notice that the wrong document has been used until when there's a petition. It is very bad. So you as a procurement specialist or practitioner, familiarize yourself with the standard tender documents. They are available within the PPRA website. Make sure you're using the latest one. Don't embarrass yourself. Next is contracts with public officers, limitation of contracts with public officers. As a state organ or public entity shall not enter into a contract for procurement with a public officer, state officer, or member of a committee or board of that state organ or public entity, or an officer of that procuring entity. You see, you're already an employee, or their board members, the directors. You should never award to your employees. You should never award to your board members. A state officer or a public officer shall not award or influence the award. So not only are you not supposed to award to a state officer or board member, you should also guard that they don't influence award of contracts to themselves, to their spouses, to their business associates, or to a corporation or private company where they have substantial controlling interest. Read more on that in section 59. And remember what I've always told you in the earlier presentations is that always refer to the regulations. The regulations provide further details on an item on the Act which is not well expounded. Good. So then again, section 60, it talks about specifications. I've gone ahead and qualified it also to be terms of reference. Specifications, they describe that which you want to buy. That applies for goods and also for works, but for consultancy services, description of what you want that consultancy to achieve or to do is found in what is called terms of reference. So you've been given details which should go into specifications, and you should things which you should factor in. Just go to, or as you are studying this section, you noticed section 60, subsection 3, it talks about the technical requirements. Then you're warned that your technical requirements, that is in subsection 4, should not refer to a particular trademark, name, patent, design, type, producer or service provider, or to a specific origin, unless there is no any other sufficiently precise or intelligible way of describing the requirements, and the requirements allow equivalence of what is referred to. In your specifications, don't go specific. We want a Samsung tablet, or we want which is this I'm using. You want HP laptops. It is presumed that once you put like that, you are disadvantaging other companies who are equally producing goods or laptops that can meet your needs, unless where it is impossible for you. So you should ensure that your specifications or terms of reference are clear enough. They're not prone to misinterpretation or some opaqueness or some how do I put it, some in between. It should be very clear and precise. Another thing I want us to look at in section 61 is on tender security. An accounting officer or procuring entity may require, remember, it is not a must. It may require, depending on the sensitivity of what is being procured, may require a tender security to be provided with tenders as may be prescribed. So it should be an absolute figure in your tender document. It should come out clearly. You want a tender security of how much, but it should not be more than 2% of the tender value of the contract. So just note that as you're giving your obsolete figure, it should not be more than 2%. Remember, in your procurement plan, you've already given the estimated cost or price for whatever you want to procure. So based on that, you come up with the tender security. And what are some of the reasons why procuring entities require tender securities? To caution them from some suppliers who are not very honest. They might go through the procurement process and then let you down at the end of it, or you wasted money and time and they even don't take up the offer that you will give. So the tender security helps in such situations. So when you go to subsection 3, you are told tender security can be forfeited if a person submitted the tender withdraws the tender after the deadline for submitting tenders, but before expiry of the period during which the tenders shall remain valid, or refuses to enter into a written contract as required in section 136, or fails to furnish any required performance security. So those are the scenarios which a tender security comes in to reduce the loss. You are awarding, someone refuses to enter into a contract, or you go on and someone withdraws their bid. So you're supposed to be compensated for that damage. A procuring entity may immediately release any tender security if the procurement proceedings are terminated, if the procuring entity determines that none of the submitted tender is responsive, or a contract of the procurement is entered to, or a bidder declines to extend tender validity. So I think that is clear. Declaration not to engage in corruption, section 62. When you're giving tender documents to bidders, there should be one, there's a form, it's SD something that is for corruption, a declaration that you will not engage in corruption practices. So ensure that there is a section, even in quotation, there is one of the pages where they say that they will not engage themselves in corruption and any fraudulent practices. Then we go to section 63. Section 63 talks about termination of procurement proceedings. You have been guided that if it is prior, an accounting officer or entity may at any time prior to notification of tender award, you may terminate or cancel procurement or asset disposal proceedings without entering into a contract where any of the following applies. So you've been given conditions under which you can terminate a contract prior to notification of tender award. You cannot give a notification of tender award or intention to award, then you go ahead and terminate. And now unless this comes from PPRA or High Court, as we discussed in the previous presentations on appeals. So you've been guided under Section 33, conditions under which you can terminate or cancel a procurement and asset disposal proceedings. But anytime you do that kind of cancellation or termination, you should report to PPRA within 14 days. And you must give the reason for termination. The same applies to all those people who participated in this tender. You must communicate to them that it has been terminated, and you also give the reason for termination. Good. My slides are not moving. Yeah. So what are some what is the form of communication that is permitted in public procurement and asset disposal? All communications must be done in writing. There's nothing like I was told, like we have just had a meeting and we have agreed and you've been given instructions. That happens a lot, but it's up to you as a procurement person to be wise and to remember this section 64 and find a way of ratifying things, of ensuring that whatever that was discussed in that meeting and agreed and you were given instruction is done in writing. And when we're talking, when we are saying in writing, remember ICT, it has been recognized in subsection 2 of section 64. So email communication is acceptable. And all this it's in respect to publication of notices, submission and opening of tenders, tender evaluation, requesting of information on tender and disposal processes, dissemination of laws, digital signatures, or as may be prescribed by regulation. So ensure any communication that you do, it is in writing. If you do it in on say orally by use of telephone, come back, write an email and refer to our telephone conversation. Good. We go to section 65, inappropriate influence on valuations. A person who submitted a tender shall not make any unsolicited communication to the procuring entity or any person involved in procurement. They shall not attempt in any way to influence evaluation and award. So just for noting, Section 66 on corruption, coercive, obstructive, collusive, or fraudulent practices, along with a conflict of interest. This section has gone into length describing what is corruption there, what is it that is conflict of interest. So take your time and go through it, section 62, all the way to section 66. Oh, sorry. It's actually section 66 that talks about this conflict of interest, corruption, coercive, obstructive, pollution, and fraudulent practices. So take time, go through that, and have it on your fingertips. When we talk of conflict of interest, we're talking about being at a position where you can influence directly or indirectly, you influence decisions for gain. And more has been explained even in the regulations. Then we talk of confidentiality. It is expected that you as the procurement person and any other person who is involved in the procurement process upholds confidentiality unless not to release any information unless they have been authorized. You see, like the procurement person, you have been authorized to be, for example, the secretary of the evaluation committee, and that allows you, for example, to seek any clarification as long as it's not disadvantaging other bidders from one bidder. And in a scenario, for example, where there's an investigation, their information can be provided. But otherwise, you are supposed to uphold confidentiality you as the procurement person and any other person who is involved in the procurement process. Read more on section 67. I've talked of exceptions. The disclosure is to an authorized employee or agent of the procuring entity or member of a board or committee of the procuring entity. The disclosure is for purposes of law enforcement. Disclosure is for purpose of review under section 15. Disclosure due to a court order. Yes, disclosure is made to the authority or review board under this act. But that notwithstanding, it's expected that you uphold high levels of confidentiality as you are handling procurement matters. Next is about procurement records. Procurement records are supposed to be kept for not for at least 6 years after an award has been made, or even after a procurement termination has been done. And section 68 gives you some of the records which you should keep: brief description of goods, works, or services being procured, your specifications or terms of reference can stand in for that. If a procedure other than open tendering was used, the reasons for doing so. As part of the procurement procedure, anything was advertised in the newspaper or other publications. So generally, whatever that you keep in your procurement files, from requisition, in fact, from the procurement plan, requisition, then you go to opening registers, evaluations, professional opinion, name them, everything is supposed to be kept for at least 6 years from the time of award, or if termination of the contract was done, still you keep for at least six years. So if you lose those procurement records, that is an offense. We will be talking about offenses towards the end of the act. That is an offense. Next is section 69, procurement approvals and delegation of responsibilities. No procurement or procurements relating to any procedures in procurement shall be done in writing. Approval is done in writing, not by word of mouth. So you as the procurement person, you will use your emotional intelligence, even in scenarios where you've not been provided with a written approval. Be emotionally intelligent, find a way of going around it until you get that written approval. Then no procurement shall be made, no procurement approval shall be made to operate retrospectively to any date earlier than the date on which it was made, except on procurements in response to an urgent need. What does this mean? It means you go ahead and procure, then you come seeking for an approval after the procurement has been done. Such should not be the case, except where there is an urgent need. Urgent needs are known. They are described. There is war. There is a force majeure, unexpected breakdowns. But a justification has to be done there for that to qualify as an approval being sought retrospectively. But get them up front. Get the approvals up front. That way you are in safe hands. So no procurement approval shall be made by a person exercising delegated authority as an accounting officer or head of procurement function, unless such delegation has been approved in writing by the accounting officer or by head of procurement unit, respectively. So when your head of section, head of procurement, is away and you're the deputy, and now it is your turn to approve things, insist that you are issued that responsibility in writing. Remember, we said even in evaluations, the revisions changed. that requirement that it's only the head of procurement function who was the secretary to evaluation committees. Now he can give that responsibility in writing to an officer, a qualified officer in his department. So beware of that. And you heads of procurement, don't be the only ones going for those evaluations. Empower your people. And you supporting officers or deputies, take the responsibility, but ensure you have been given that responsibility in writing. I think before I close this section, just know that once you've been accorded the responsibility, you actually carry the responsibility. Should there be any issue, you as a signatory, you carry that responsibility, and the accounting officer, even if they've delegated, they are still accountable on this matter. So don't do your work in a careless manner. Just know that the fact that you are given that responsibility in writing, you cannot run away from it. I think that then brings us to the end of part 6. If you have any questions or comments, you will go to the channel and you will put them there. Thank you very much. It's been quite long, but I believe we have learned something. Thank you.